Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you will have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey vet rehabbers, now conflict is an unavoidable part of life and can have serious repercussions to a working environment or client relationships. Amy Newfield joins us today to share advice on conflict resolution and how we can better equip ourselves to manage disagreements and challenges through open, honest, and kind conversation. Before we head over to that chat, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Cape Animal Physiotherapy. Thanks for the shout out on Instagram. Please reach out to me on megan@onlinepethealth.com so that I can gift you your limited edition veterinary rehabilitation podcast mug. This year, our Vet Rehab Summit focuses on the ethical challenges we face as vet rehabbers. Please join us as we explore several specific ethical challenges, how we find our personal and professional ethical boundaries on these issues, and how we can bring change through education and increasing awareness on the ethical issues that we are most passionate about. Tickets for the event on the 31st of August are available now at vetrehabsummit.com. And don't forget, if you're an Online Pet Health member, you get free VIP access to this event. Before we head over to that chat, a quick word from our sponsor, Curacao Vet. Curacao is owned by Nada Robinson. Nada first developed her courses at the Colorado State University, where she started the medical acupuncture for veterinarian certificate program, and this was in 1998. In so doing, she developed a science-based platform for veterinary acupuncture, the first of its kind. Today, Curacao Vet offers a comprehensive curriculum in integrative medicine with a rational, evidence-supported foundation. Courses include medical acupuncture, photomedicine, botanical medicine, medical massage, and integrative rehabilitation. You can discover Curacao Vet at curacao.org. So let's head over to the chat with Amy.
Hello, and welcome to How to Manage Conflict within the Rehab team. My name is Amy Newfield. I'm a veterinary technician specialist in emergency critical care, but I also have a master's in management and leadership. I've written 2 leadership books, and hopefully this quick webinar is going to be able to help you, give you some tools and tips and tricks. Now, let me be very clear. There's no way that you're going to be able to perfectly manage conflict at the end of this webinar. It's going to give you some idea of things you need to do a deeper dive in. So please don't end here. I want you to go ahead and continue to go ahead and learn about managing conflict. So if you're struggling with someone on your team, or if you happen to be in a leadership role and struggling with individuals on your team, let's go ahead and give you some resources just as a high-level view so that you can kind of start the process of managing conflict within your hospital. So I'm going to just talk about how there are different personalities. The reality is that conflict happens because we're not talking to ourselves. A lot of times if we were talking to ourselves, we'd agree with ourselves, we would understand where we were coming from, but there's a ton of different personalities. And so first and foremost, I always think that if you're in a leadership role, you really do need to understand who are the personalities on your team. So one of the most popular methods out there is a Myers-Briggs personality test. And I have a resource at the end of this section for you. It's called 16personalities.com. It's free. It's 16personalities.com. And you can go on there and do a free test. Now, if you want to pay, it's not a very expensive fee, but pay a nominal fee. They'll give you up to like 50 to 75 pages of information on your personality. But in the very least, they give you a really solid information on the high level view about your personality. And again, be honest about it. Whenever I've had an employer tell me, hey, Amy, I need you to take this personality test, I'm like, boo, hiss, you're not going to pigeonhole me into a personality. But the reality is there's a lot of merit and a lot of weight on these. And Myers-Briggs happens to have been around for many years. It's pretty good science at this point. So I want to dive into just understanding basic personality traits, because you may be experiencing conflict with somebody on your team, or you might have 2 individuals who are conflicted, And just understanding some big traits is going to help you. Now, the website 16 Personalities denote that there are 16 personalities that you can have in Myers-Briggs. There are basically 4 different groups, and in each of these groups, there are 2 personality traits. So total, as one can tell, is 16. All right, so let's dive into the differences just on a high level view. Extroverted versus introverted. So extroverts tend to draw energy from action. They like crowds, they react first, they think later. To them, being alone takes more energy than interacting with people. Being with people is the thing that recharges them. For extroverts, the pandemic in 2020 was exceptionally difficult, right? Constant isolation all the time. That was really hard for extroverts. Now, meanwhile, introverts in 2020 were like, wow, this is the best thing ever. Not that for the pandemic, obviously, but just being alone. When people said, hey, you can't see other people, all the introverts of the world were like, okay, sounds good to me, right? So introverts tend to draw energy from inaction. They think first, react second. Crowds are stressful to them. It's not that they can't handle a crowd. So I'm introverted. Probably I toe the line, especially when I'm lecturing. I can be very extroverted, but I am introverted. At the end of the day, being alone is the thing that recharges me. I absolutely love to just relax in my own space and be silent. I can handle a crowd, but is it my thing that I want to go to crowds every day? No, absolutely not. Being alone is the thing that re-energizes me. So even understanding just extroverts versus introvert, if you're a leader in your hospital, if you own the hospital, if you have team members that you're struggling with, maybe it's as simple as one's extroverted, one's introverted. The extrovert's always talking over the introverted one. The introverted one is really introverted. Again, knowing that you tend to lean a little more here or there, but there are people that toe that line all the time. It's not to say an extrovert doesn't want to be introverted on time. And conversely, introverts definitely want to be extroverted. But it's important for us to understand that when we're talking to other people and we're struggling with them, maybe it's because of one of these 2 personality traits. So one of the other groups of 4 is sensing versus intuition. Sensors tend to focus on real senses. They can see, they can touch, they feel. They trust the information that's tangible and that they can see it. Intuition people, hi, guilty as charged, tend to focus on the possibilities. They learn from larger experiences and they can apply it to what could be in the future. So I once worked on a well-being team. It was really great. I learned so much about health and well-being and psychological safety, and we're going to talk about some of those things because I think it's really important when we're dealing with conflict. I remember my boss handed me something, and she basically handed me a brochure of a conference, and she said, Amy, you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking we could do a well-being conference for this company. I said, that's amazing. So she's holding a brochure, and in the brochure it lists one track, one day, and there was like one speaker. You know that an intuition person was like, whoa, what are the possibilities? So of course, by the time I had like a 5-minute conversation with her, I had blown up this small little idea that she could see and touch and feel because it was a brochure in her hand. And I blew it up to, we're going to have a 3-day conference. We're going to bring in all these speakers. This is what our budget's going to need to be. We're going to need the company to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to have it at a fancy hotel. And she was like, slow it down. Okay. So again, sensing, intuition, 2 very different individuals. Thinkers or feelers. I'm thinker to a fault. In fact, it's gotten me in trouble a lot. And as far as conflicts, I would say that most of my conflicts are driven heavily by the fact that I am an overthinker and I struggle sometimes with feelings. It's not to say that I don't have empathy. I cry at the drop of a hat. Oh my gosh, those sometimes commercials, they just rip my heart out. I see a commercial on TV and the next thing you know, I'm bawling my eyes out. So I do have feelings. Let me be very clear, because it made it sound like I was the most callous individual ever. But the reality is like I am over analytical. And when someone is having a conflict with me and they're pouring out their emotions, I shut my emotions down. I don't use my emotions, I don't use my feelings to place judgment on a decision. If this is what needs to happen, this is what needs to happen. I don't care, that X, Y, and Z or how you're feeling. This is what needs to happen, right? And sometimes it can come across as harsh and callous. And some of you are like light bulb moment, bing, right? You are in the same boat and you struggle with this. And I have struggled with this my entire life. I've gotten better. I've tried to stop, like bring in some emotion or see how the other person is feeling. But feelers are going to look at the impact it would have on those around them, and they take into consideration other people's feelings. This is really very different than an overthinker. I'm an overthinker, again, to a fault. It has definitely gotten me in trouble with relationships, massive conflicts, because I'm like, hey, I don't understand why you're crying right now. We need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to stop crying. This is what needs to happen. If you are owning a practice, if you're in a leadership role, you can't do those things. You have to allow the emotion in, and you have to recognize that everybody is different, and that's really important. Lastly, judging or perceiving. I'm definitely a judger. I live in a very organized manner because I'm an overthinker. I have a plan, it needs to come to fruition, and we check off all the boxes. Perceiving likes to keep options open. They're a little bit more spontaneous and adaptable. Well, let's go back to 2020 when we all found out that we're going to shut down the world, okay? In that moment, all of my plans, my little checkbox system went away. Amy was told she needed to stay home. She was no longer going to be traveling. She was no longer going to be lecturing. The trips and everything that I had planned were gone. And I was losing my marbles. I was like, wait a minute, hang on, what do I do? Hang on, I'm a judging individual. Like, I live in a box. And the perceiving individuals, not that they thought it was cool, but they were like, hey, I'm a little bit more flexible. I can bend and flex a lot better. So we have to recognize that even in our own conflicts within our hospitals and our lives, we may be dealing with someone who is a little bit more of a free spirit. They are spontaneous, they are adaptable, and we're going, you're driving me crazy. I need you to write down a plan. What are you doing? How can you be like this? How can you just be like, ah? Pros and cons to every single personality type. There is no perfect personality. So it's not exact science. Again, there's plenty of us who fall in the middle, who kind of toe that line. One of the things that I always encourage people to do is learn about themselves, but learn about each other, because the minute you learn about each other, you can take the conflict down. So 16personalities.com, there's that website that I recommended for you. But first and foremost, before you even want to go ahead and dive into conflict management, you got to understand where the other person's coming from. And that's a heavy science. I want you to dive into personalities. I want you to dive into personality traits. I really want you to get to know people. All right. So let's talk about conflict resolution, right? Conflict resolution or dealing with underperformers is the hardest part. It's easier to just ignore it, right? When you have an issue with somebody on your team, when you have an issue with somebody that you're struggling with in day to day, it's just easiest to ignore it, right? We disagreed, fine. We agree to disagree, we move on. This is the part of education of yourself when you are a new manager or supervisor, or even into your leadership, or even as a team member. There is no perfect conflict resolution. I've never sat down, managed conflict between two individuals, or even managed conflict between myself and another individual and go, nailed it. That was the most perfect conflict resolution in the whole world. My goodness, I'm done. I know all the skills, I know all the traits. The reality is how you resolve conflict with one person or a group of people, guess what? It's going to be very different because people have different personalities. And so just when you think you're doing really good at conflict resolution, somebody's going to throw you a curveball and you'll be like, whoa, I did not see that personality trait coming at me. So whenever you are dealing with conflict, here's the thing. Talking face to face is always the best option. I have seen so many technology things go awry. Here's a great example. I do coaching for hospital teams all the time. I coach leaders. I do one-on-ones with leaders, and this particular leader is really struggling. She called me out of the blue, and that's not like her, to say she was losing her marbles. She was about to fire someone. Did I have time to do a coaching call right then and there? I said, in an hour, I do. So we got on a call. She said, you're not gonna believe this. I go, what happened? Well, this employee, I'm done, Amy. I'm just done. I go, what's going on? Well, she went ahead and texted me last night. Apparently her cell phone died and she needed a new cell phone. So she last night called out of work. The entire shift, she is now done. She is not coming into work today. I go, okay, why? Apparently her cell phone, a new cell phone's getting shipped to her. She needs to be home to sign for it. I said, okay, I agree. Not the best excuse, but our cell phones are our Bibles. Like, we can't live without them. Our entire life is in a phone. We all know this to be true because anytime you've ever remotely thought I've lost my phone, it's massive panic, like, oh my gosh, right? Like, how am I going to function? How am I even going to drive a car? How am I going to get home? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to live, right? It's terrifying. So here's this team member of hers who texts in and says, I can't come in. I need to be home to receive the phone. They said it's between 8 to 5. It's getting dropped off. I have to be home. I'm sorry. I can't show up to work. Obviously, that's not appropriate. So what does this owner do? This owner texts back. Well, that's not appropriate. We need to find a replacement. We have a very busy day tomorrow. We have surgeries. We've got a bunch of stuff going on. I need you to come in. Employee says, I'm sorry, I can't. Not happening. Boss writes back, what kind of phone is it? Employee goes, it's an Apple iPhone. Okay, well, is it possible that you can contact the store and have them reroute it to the hospital for pickup here? She replies back, I don't think so. The store is closed. I just managed to get the order in. All I know is it's coming tomorrow. I can't come into work. Bye. Owner then writes, well, how about going online? Can you go online and see whether or not you can reroute it? Employee writes, I don't know my password to Apple. She writes, well, maybe I can help you figure it out. What is going on right now? We can see where this is going, right? Employee writes, I don't know that I can have you help me figure it out. If I wanted to figure it out, I would. At this point, I'm taking off tomorrow, the end, right? Manager, aka owner boss, writes, well, this seems a little bit crazy. I have an Apple, and I just think we can call them tomorrow morning. You should come in. Employee writes, again, as I told you, I'm not coming in. This is what's happening. Employer writes, yeah, so I'm really disappointed that you don't think that you need to come in tomorrow. I'm disappointed. Employee, and this has been going on for now 25 minutes. Employee now writes, well, I'm disappointed in you and not understanding that this is a very big deal and I can't live without a cell phone. Employer writes, well, I think, and then proceeds to go ahead and writes everything in a text message. Employee writes some scathing stuff back, and now they're fighting and full on conflict. Let me be very clear. Conflicts do not resolve over email, text, mind reading, whatever it is you think you want to do. Don't do it. Just stop. So we dialed it back, and besides the fact that I said to this boss owner, I said, why do we care about what phone she has? Why are we even going into this much depth? All I need you to say is, you need to come in, you need to find a replacement. When she said no, then you just need to say, fine, I'm going to go ahead and find a replacement, but we need to discuss this the next shift that you're in, right? The end, period. Or if you're really that mad, you pick up the phone. You don't then go, what phone is it? Can I help you find the password? Where is it getting delivered? Why can't you reroute it? Can you call the store? What store did you get it from? Blah, blah, blah. What exactly happened to your phone? She put that in there too. I was like, what is going on? Most conflicts do not escalate if we just talk to each other. So first and foremost, if you're having a conflict with someone and you're finding your blood start to boil and you're starting to get angry, stop. Whatever methodology that you've been communicating with, unless it's verbal, you are going to stop what you're doing. You're going to pick up the telephone. You're going to ask to talk to them in person. You're going to go face to face. You are not going to do anything other than that. I can assure you, all of those other methodologies fail miserably. So within the few days of whatever conflict you have with this person, if it didn't go the way that you wanted to, like this employee didn't show up, I want you to go ahead and give timely feedback for that person. The second rule of thumb is to document everything. Obviously, especially if it's an employee, the conversation, the steps, and it doesn't always have to be signed off. So here in the United States, one of the things that employers like to do is if I'm dealing or trying to give some critique or feedback to an employee, I'm going to have to sign off that they understand that I'm upset with them and that I really need them to sign that we've talked. You don't need to necessarily do that. I don't know if that's a thing in Australia, but you don't need to worry about that. So I understand that one of the biggest things is you dislike somebody or they dislike each other or you have team members fighting. So I want you to become a mediator. And this is not a skill that you can just learn by listening to me one time. It's practice, it's learning more, It's how to become a mediator. So if you have two employees that are absolutely at each other's throat, I want you to go ahead and listen to each individual separately. But here's where employers go wrong. They listen to each person separately, and then they talk to the other people and say, I talked to Amy, and she said, you did X, Y, and Z. And so I'm thinking if you don't do X, Y, and Z again, things are going to be better. Or I talked to Kate, and Kate is mad about X, Y, and Z. And so, no, you've listened to them both separately. They've given you their grievances. And this is what you're going to say. I really need both of you to get along. So, and this is a really important, team factor to have. And so I really want you both to talk. And they're going to say, I'm never talking to that person again. Unfortunately, here at Happy Cause Rehab Center, we promote a dynamic that is a healthy workplace environment, and this is not that. So I'm going to have you digest everything we talked about. I also listen to the other person, and we're going to have a meeting together because I really want you both to be able to communicate better. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to act as a mediator. This is the hardest part of your job, and you might need a witness in there as well. So you set the tone. You automatically tell them what the other person said. So you say, hey, Amy said that at times you don't do a lot with the cleaning list, and she feels like she's always the one cleaning. And, Amanda said that you can sometimes be a little rude and a little bit distant and passive aggressive, and she doesn't know what you necessarily need help with. Other than that, you're always cleaning, and it's okay to take a break from time to time. So I brought you in here together to have a conversation so that we can talk about the cleaning list, but also to make sure that you can go ahead and have a respectful relationship in this team, because that's really important for this hospital. And rather than just talking about each other behind your backs or coming to me, I want you to learn to grow in your communication skills. Mind blow, right? This is really, really hard to do. And don't get me wrong, I failed miserably at this. I didn't even do this until I was very comfortable in my leadership skills. And then when employees would come and they would complain about each other behind their backs, I literally would make them have face-to-face conversations, because nothing resolves over email, text, or gossiping. There's likely not one person who's completely right and one person who's completely wrong. So I want you at the end of this to come up with the plan of the action. If you do this right, at the end of that conversation, Amy says, hey, I'm really sorry that I come across as passive aggressive, and sometimes you just don't seem like you're cleaning as much. And Amanda says, well, you're always cleaning. Like, how about you tell me what you need, but make sure that you sit down and eat lunch too, right? This is really important. So whenever we're talking about a conflict, we have to try to do our best to leave the emotion out of it. Now, sometimes that's impossible, right? Saying things like, I'm going to need you to calm down. That's impossible, right? We shouldn't be saying that. That's probably one of the worst things that you can say. Instead, I want you to replace, I need you to calm down, with, let's stop here and come back to this another day. Whatever the conflict is, it probably doesn't need to be resolved right then and there. It probably can be resolved a completely different day. So remember to focus on the issue and not the emotion. Always bring them back to how it's affecting the hospital, the coworker, you, whatever it is, and ask their opinion on how it should be resolved. Let them try out some of those suggestions and highlight the positive that maybe the other person has, or whatever the situation is. She might not always clean, but she's great with clients, right? And just keep bringing it back to the actual topic at hand. Now, one thing I want to talk to you very briefly about, again, this is a lot of information getting thrown at you on a high level view. My master's is in management leadership. So I got to learn a lot about communication skills and conflict resolution. And honestly, I feel like I barely scratched the surface. In my second book, I obviously created a lot of information in that book to help people. But honestly, again, just barely scratching the surface. So throughout your entire leadership skills, I want you to leadership journey, or whether or not you're even talking to another teammate and struggling with communication and conflict resolution, I want you to constantly challenge yourself throughout the year to pick up an article, to pick up a book, listen to a TED Talk, listen to whatever it is, so that you can learn more about this. So here's the other thing I want to talk to you about: how we give critique, how we give feedback. Feedback delivery a lot of time is just done really poorly. And unfortunately, conflict comes about because of how we deliver feedback. So when we go ahead and tell somebody, something that might not be perfect, we say something like, hey, you need to not come in late, or hey, you need to show up on time. I want you to rework that. The first thing you need to do is prime the amygdala. The amygdala lives in your brain, and it's your flight or fight response. And anybody who's just attacked outright by getting some feedback or criticism, they don't tend to do very well. So I want you to prime the amygdala by saying, hey, I'm wondering if you have a minute because I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't have to be right now, but I would like to talk to you about it. Now, what that does is the person is probably going to say, yes, we have time to talk about it right now. It's kind of a trick question because most people aren't going to be like, oh, not right now, but can we talk in a little bit? Especially if they don't know necessarily what you want to talk about. Or, hey, I was wondering if we could talk about a conversation we had last week. It just didn't sit very well. And at some point, I'd like to chat with you about it. Oh, of course, that person's going to be like, yeah, I want to talk right now. But by them saying yes, it immediately engages that person on a very different level than just being attacked. The second thing that you're going to do is provide that feedback by leaving the emotion out of it. You know, last week we just felt like we were off in our communication skills, and it was really bothering me because you said X, Y, and Z. And I thought about it, and it really hit home to me, and it really affected me, and I didn't know how to respond at the time. And this is why I think, you know, you might have said that, but it was pretty hurtful. What do you think about this? All right, so here you go. You left the emotion out of it. You told the person what the conflict was that you're having an issue with. But here's the last part of that. You ask their opinion. And too often when providing feedback, you don't give someone their opinion. You just tell them what you think. Instead, we have to ask for their opinion. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? That's always a good thing. Even when you're mediating conflict between two individuals, it's a great way to go ahead and break up that tension and say, hey, Amanda, I'm going to pause here. What do you think about what she just said? This allows the other person to share their emotions so that there's equality in the conversation. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with conflict, it's only one-sided. So one of the other skills that I just want to put into your radar is polite, kind, and honest conversation. The way that we communicate is really important to resolving conflict. If we're just verbally assaulting someone, if we're saying all the things we shouldn't, like, you know, you did this, or you always, or you never, that's not going to be good communication. So whenever we're communicating with people, again, remembering that there's so many different personality traits out there, I want you to think about how you're communicating, because that's going to determine whether or not we resolve the conflict or whether or not we stay in the conflict. So what is polite, kind, and honest conversation is? Well, one, just being polite, right? Leave the emotion and personalization out of it. You are, or don't be sad. You are attacking the other person never feels good. So one of the things that I always love to say is lead with empathy first. Lead with that politeness first. They need to understand that you're coming from a kind place or you're never going to resolve the conflict, especially when we're dealing, say, with clients, right? Clients can be very difficult. I mean, talk about conflict resolution right there. We've got a client who has a perceived injustice, either due to money or a perceived level of care that didn't go the way they wanted to at our facility. And now we have to have that conversation with them. I want you to be polite at all costs. This is really important. I want you to show that you care. And so, especially with a client, you can say, I know you really love Fluffy so much. I know that you're upset because you feel like, we didn't do right by Fluffy. And I totally understand why you would be upset, right? So, whatever that is, showing them polite and kindness and showing them a little bit of grace is great, as opposed to contacting that client and going, listen, you yelled at the staff and you're completely wrong, and we're not going to take that from you. Nope. I understand why you might be upset because I love my pets just as much as you do. And I know that you are one of the best pet owners because you're obviously very upset about this, right? So just giving a little bit to that person takes their attack mode down. When we don't give them any polite or kindness, then they're going to ramp up their attack mode. So whatever it is, you're amazing at, whatever that is. I was once dealing with an employee that was consistently late all the time. And I was so conflicted because this was an amazing veterinary technician, was a high performer when she was there, but she was always late 15 to 20 minutes. And because it's shift work, especially in an emergency hospital, there was someone who had to stay late for her every single day because of her tardiness. And despite me going up to her and saying, you need to be in on time, you need to be in on time, you need to come in on time, I had to reshape and learn about conflict and also giving feedback. Think about that. I just walked up to her and said, listen, you can't do that anymore. I really need you to be here on time. Stop coming in late. Do you think that was well received? No. She said, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. But she kept on being late. So I completely changed it up. I learned a little bit about how to communicate this person. One day I said, hey, do you have a minute? I really want to talk to you about something, but it doesn't have to be right now. But if we could talk sometime today, that'd be great. So now I'm having a private conversation. Remember, praise in public, criticize in private. Okay. So here I am, like, oh, this is not going to go well. And I decided I'm going to try this polite, kind, and conversation. So I sat her down and I said, hey, you know what? You are amazing when you were here. Absolutely one of the best veterinary technicians. Like, you know how to run this emergency floor. You know how to get the doctors going to where they need to. You know great patient care. The problem is that you are always late every single day. And the concern that I have is not just because you're late because that's the policy, but you're actually affecting the other team members. I'm not sure you're aware that they're getting home later. They're not seeing their kids off to school. It's becoming a real problem. What can I do to help support you so that you come in on time? Very different conversation than me just simply telling her to go ahead and show up. I need you to be on, kind. I threw this in here in case you didn't know. It's free of deceit and untruthfulness, being sincere, right? And then this is where the honest part comes in. So I honestly left all the emotion out of it. I used to go up to her and say, you're driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts. Just come in on time. Who cares if she's driving me nuts, right? I'm telling the truth, but I'm coming from a place of kindness. And I'm explaining in clear detail how it's not just impacting her or myself or the policy, but it's actually impacting other people on the team. And don't attack, because the minute you attack back, you're never going to resolve the conflict. Focus again on how it affects the team, the individual, or you. People love to avoid a whole bunch of conflict. You know, you're like, I love conflict, I can manage it. No. If there's something stuck in your coworker's teeth, you're like, should I tell them? You should tell them. A technician made a medical mistake, right? A vet nurse made a medical mistake. What do we do about that? Well, it wasn't that big. I'm sure they'll learn, you know, that sort of thing. The highest grossing surgeon or whatever is now coming in late. Whatever it is in your facility, you know, you need to figure out how to go ahead and have that conversation. And again, get rid of the devices. Don't do it over email. Don't even suggest, hey, hi, I really need to meet with you over email. Now the person's anxiety is going to go up through the roof. They're going to freak out. You need to talk to people. One of the things that somebody said to me in one of my coaching conversations, I just love this so much. She said, what you've told me over the last year is the more that I talk to my teammates, the less problems I'm going to have, because I'm going to get to know them and I'm going to get better with my communication skills with each person. And I said, yeah. And she said, and I didn't believe you at first because you kept making me have these conversations that were very uncomfortable. But Amy, it's true. I actually got to know people better. The minute you start to have conversations with people, the less conflicts you're going to have. Or when you do have conflicts, they're going to be a lot smaller because you're going to know where that person comes from. So again, polite, kind, and honest conversation. I want you to think about reshaping sentences. So how do you rework PKH into your own life? You are rude. It's very honest, not polite and kind. You act rude. Okay, it's very honest. It's not necessarily kind, right? Or this, you are a kind person. I know you're a kind person, but lately you've been rude to members of the team. What's going on, right? Can I have a conversation with you? I ask permission to give feedback. I know you don't want to be like this, and you may not even be aware, but you seem to be really short with team members lately. What's going on? Is there something going on, right? Getting their feedback is really important. Here's your homework, okay? So Kim Scott wrote this bestseller book, Radical Candor. There's a revised edition. It's actually polite, kind, and honest conversation. She wishes she didn't call it Radical Candor because unfortunately it almost gives you permission to just be a jerk to anybody. Like, you are rude, right? Like that's radical, it's candid, but that's not her intent. She's funny. Listen to it on audiobook. There's some light curse words in there. I don't like boring leadership books, so buy this, download it, listen to it from your work. I guarantee you this is going to help you with conflict management. So this is obviously just a high level view. This isn't going to solve all your problems. I threw a lot at you. I want you to take this, I want you to run with it. I want you to grow and develop your conflict resolution skills. I want you to grow your communication skills. I want you to do all those things. And remember that just when you think you're doing pretty good, there's another personality out there that's going to throw something at you. If you ever have any questions or want to reach out to me, there's my email address, there's my website. Thank you for everything that you do.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Curacor. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free. So please go and check them out at curacor.org. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit. It's on Saturday, the 31st of August, 2024. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com.